Now we're going to cross to the Population Minister, Tony Burke, who has been releasing the federal government's population strategy today. He's now fielding questions from the media, and we'll go live to that now.
Getting people out of the big cities.
In some areas that is the case. There's no doubt the market is driving regional development in a way that never used to happen. You go back to decentralisation policies of the 1970s, for example, and it was all about government picking winners and then driving local areas to be able to grow. This time, the resources boom, movement of retirees and the broadband network are doing it for us. Communities are actually coming forward with their own growth agendas, and it's a matter for us to work out how can we help them unlock those opportunities. Some of the growth will come from immigration, but a lot of it will come from people who have decided that the major cities are no longer where they want to live. And they are shifting.
Your speech talked a lot about traffic congestion, but it didn't mention public transport. Isn't that the best way to bust some of that traffic congestion?
I think you can, in most communities, match where you've got bumper-to-bumper traffic, and you tend to also have peak hour public transport that's full. So I'm not sure that you necessarily find different ways of dealing it to what I've been able to detail today. We need to look beyond the concept of, is it simply about do we simply accept that people will live as far away from their jobs as they currently do? Or, as the strategy is recommending, can we actually start to engage in planning and start to get the hubs of employment and in the outer suburbs to be able to provide opportunities for people to work closer to home?
But is there room for the federal government to offer more money for public transport projects?
Oh, look, Anthony Albanese has had a significant program in different ways through Infrastructure Australia at looking at some of those issues, and that's certainly been an engagement. It's happened through a different portfolio, but we have been active in that area.
Minister, how do you sell a regional lifestyle to somebody whose family and relatives all live in a capital city?
Well, I've got to say, I live in a capital city and I would not want to move. I have lived in the same part of a city all my life and love it, and I don't want to move. But a large number of the people I grew up with have. And you only have to look at the Evo Cities model. It's interesting when you go to one of their events, because it's not just an advertising campaign. You go to their events, they've been held in Sydney and now to be able to be rolled out nationally. And the place is packed. And packed with people who either go to a board where they see employment opportunities or a board where they see small business opportunities. They can then go directly to a stall for the region where it is. They've got real estate prices there, they get information about the local schools, they can get a sense straight away as to whether they'd like to live there, and it's been extraordinarily successful. The opportunities, when the market drives them, do speak for themselves if you provide a pathway for that information to get out. And don't forget, backed up by what has been the biggest investment in regional Australia in the federal budget.
In the release, you said there's around $80 million to be spent on reducing traffic congestion. How on earth do you do that?
The direct parts of the traffic congestion, there was a $60 million program there under Anthony Albanese's portfolio about managing motorways. What that goes to is looking at different ways that you can improve the technology of our motorways. For example, you get very different rates of traffic flow if you have set speed limits to if you have variable speed limits. If you have variable speed limits, when you get an accident right up the front, instead of just allowing everyone to pack in behind it until it's in gridlock, you can slow down the traffic on its way in, you get much better flow through, and as I said in the speech, the data that we have says that travel times can improve by up to 26% through better management of those motorways.
So much of Australia's population is in its 5 biggest cities. Do you integrate more places like Geelong and Ipswich that will rival city living so people will go there in bigger numbers?
And that model is something that's being used in different ways. Certainly Victoria has used the model that you described there. In places like Sydney, you've got a large number of people who do commute either from the Illawarra or from the Central Coast. And in Brisbane, you've got the satellite cities of people in large numbers who travel back into Brisbane, back and forth to Brisbane each day. So for there, both issues are relevant. The issues of how do we manage the traffic flow and improve that, relevant issue. And it's something that we've engaged in and it's something that's part of the budget. But also, engaging in better planning is a way of providing local employment in those satellite cities so that not everyone who lives there is reliant on the main CBD for work, and you don't end up with a problem of creating dormitory suburbs. Really good example of this is one of the Queensland examples, the development at Springfield, where to make sure, as well as the public transport hub that's been put in place and the improvements to road, to also make sure you've got local employment, you've got local education opportunities, local health services in a master planned area to live. When you get good planning, when you get good community work done in that way, then you've got a sustainable community.
Can you see a time when the Gillard government would put a cap on population?
I think there are natural caps that can come in from infrastructure limits. For example, there are some areas, particularly in regional Australia, where the urban water supply effectively limits the level of growth. And those infrastructure issues do provide different levels of limit. Environmental legislation can put limits on the extent to which we have endless urban sprawl, because we don't want to simply be taking continued risk with our endangered species, with our endangered wetlands and the different areas that often seem like a real estate opportunity, but where you just have to say, now, hang on, let's just take a breath. So there are natural limits to growth in Australia. It will never be a case of free-for-all, but we certainly shouldn't ever be just hurtling towards arbitrary numbers or arbitrary targets. As I said, if you were to set targets 5 years ago, it would have been done without knowing anything that we're about to have a global financial crisis, nor understanding the implications of mining boom Mark II, where the dollar would end up, where our terms of trade would go.
How important is the NBN in all of this?
The NBN is the key to unlocking many of these opportunities. Because let's remember, there is one critical thing that broadband does, and it eliminates the tyranny of distance. It means no matter how far away you are physically, you can be brought together in communications terms and technological terms. That creates opportunities for you to live away from your education services but get them, away from your health specialist services but still be able to reach them, away from your employer but able to be constantly in contact. You've seen the growth of home businesses that have started to come from the levels of technology that are already there. Broadband adds a massive new layer to that. And the other thing to remember with broadband, it's just the platform. If you think of when you buy an iPhone, the day you get it from the shop, it actually doesn't do much. It dials numbers and it's got an internet surf engine, but that's about it. It's the applications that you build off it that actually create the functionality. And once we've got access in Australia, across the nation, to high-speed broadband, the imagination becomes the only limit on what can be done in eliminating the tyranny of distance.
So how do you feel about criticism such as comes from the opposition about it's just about faster movie downloads and so on?
Yeah, I'm very conscious of the arguments the opposition put forward, and I know that they often use the argument that Malcolm Turnbull, ran an internet business and therefore understands it. I was one of his customers. I was a customer of Aussie Mail. It was a very good dial-up service, but it wasn't the high-speed broadband that we're now talking about. And their arguments make sense if you ignore the capacity of the technology. But I think there's no end of Australians who have already begun the work that's going to be proving them wrong.
How are you going to make sure that migrants who come out under this regional migration program actually stay in the regions and then don't just nick off back to the cities?
Oh, look, there's a number of ways that this happens, but certainly when you involve your temporary migration systems, you can have location or employer as a condition of the visa. And so therefore, if someone breaches conditions of the visa, there are consequences that follow from that. The other thing that has had less attention in the budget is if you live in regional areas, there is a faster track to being able to apply for permanent migration. So the targeting issues which are there mean that the same numbers tell a completely different story because we're targeting them. Because we're not just saying once you're within Australia, then the market will automatically sort it out. It hasn't. And we need to target these issues better.
So in the budget, money was put aside for getting the unemployed back into the workforce. Is it hope those people, once they are trained up, will move to the areas that need to be targeted?
Well, they'll move to a series of opportunities. Some of them may well be in those areas. It may well be that other people in their local area move to those opportunities and they slot into those jobs. The important thing is we're not just relying on immigration as a lazy method to cover for skills. Instead, we're saying, no, we want people who are not yet participating in the workplace, we want them back in. We want them contributing in work to the economy. And then, for the people who are already contributing, we want to say, can we help upskill you with an extraordinary skills package as part of the budget? Then for the gaps that still can't be filled, we do rely on the immigration program, but in a far more targeted way than we have in the past. Okay?
Thank you.
Real pleasure. Thank you.
And that is the